Well, as a almost lifelong anti-nuclear, I can say that this is a surreal moment. And, I don't think I could have gotten here without AI. And, reflecting on what I was going to say today, I think there's a moment right now where newcomers can come into nuclear and use the tools available as well as traditional mentorship. So I want to start by thanking my mentors. In 2021, when I changed my mind about nuclear energy, I read a San Francisco Chronicle article about the closure of Diablo Canyon and what a great idea that was, and how that we were closing the plant 40 years early and that we were going to celebrate that. And growing up in California, it sounded right in the beginning. We don't like nuclear, at least traditionally, even though our state, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was a plan for California to be 100% nuclear powered. And our utility had an atom as a logo. And, we've fallen off of that idea for a time, but something is happening. And so I got pretty angry after I concluded that article because it felt wasteful. And I saw how much our utility has been struggling to keep up with demand, and this 100% renewable energy vision that has them running around and modifying our distribution system and not being able to really plan at a system level. And then I got deeper and I went to San Luis Obispo and I met nonprofit groups like Mothers for Nuclear and the tribal organization Yaktichu Tichu Yaktilhini, which then formed Native Nuclear. And what we saw is that this is a dream that we're actually inheriting from our great-grandparents, and it's a good one. It's pretty amazing that they designed all of this before computers were even here, and it works. And Diablo is our largest source of energy in California, and our most affordable, which came out through the discoverables of the Diablo closure. So, in December 2021, we threw a rally in downtown San Luis Obispo to save Diablo Canyon, the same place that the rallies once occurred to protest the building of Diablo. But 40 years later, we've learned a lot. And I think in this moment, I'm not embarrassed to say I was anti-nuclear. Everyone's coming around to it at its own time. But I think this moment now, Americans are changing their mind about it because we have the data to make that decision. And I don't think we ever had that before. So that coalition went on to apply for the Department of Energy's Collaboration-Based Siting Award, and we won. And so for the last 2 years, I've been running around with Mothers for Nuclear and Native Nuclear and NC State, educating communities on what it would look like to host nuclear facilities and consolidated storage facilities. And what we're seeing is we can use this moment and all this new data that's readily available at our fingertips. That was kind of behind a utility paywall, would we say, in the past. And as someone who's new to nuclear and really didn't even know how it worked, I've been able to use AI to get myself up to speed and not totally embarrass myself in rooms like this, as well as bring what I've learned. I'm a solar developer. I spent 15 years building solar farms in California. I interconnected 7,000 systems to the grid. And, I hope some nuclear developers say something like that someday. But I love the way that nuclear approaches it. And I think renewable development is reckless. And there's something in between, and nuclear development is stagnant, at a standstill. It's very difficult to get these projects going. So how can we find the middle ground? And I think AI is part of that. So through that work, I met Charles Oppenheimer, my boss, and boy, what a guy. He's actually a software developer himself. He doesn't come from the nuclear industry. His grandfather, of course, was pretty involved. And he really wanted to take on his grandfather's legacy. And so they founded a nonprofit called Oppenheimer Project to talk about the existential threat of not having enough energy to power forward and, our weapons reduction risk and opportunities there. So, that nonprofit was really trying to balance the equation, driving down the number of nuclear weapons and driving up the amount of nuclear reactors. They kind of want it to be 1-to-1. But then we were sitting and we got an email from Secretary of Energy Chris Wright, and he said, we want to get on the phone with you. And so we hopped on, and Secretary Wright said, we need help developing these sites from 0 to 1 just to get the inertia rolling on these projects, because this early site development, he noted very early in his tenure that there was a gap there. How do we get from an idea of adding nuclear to existing plants, an idea of adding greenfield nuclear, an idea of putting a nuclear reactor next to new development? How do we get that from an idea to something, to some applications going out, to some final investment decisions being achieved? And we've been trying to find the answer to that ever since. And so we took on a small amount of investment and have really just taken a customer development approach talking to utilities. So to the utilities in the room, I want to thank you. And I've just been amazed by utility leadership's interest in engaging with this nuclear development model. And I think Charles does a really good job of going to utilities and saying, what would it take to build new nuclear? Instead of coming in and saying like, oh, I have all these ideas, you know. I think humility is appropriate in this time. And what we've learned from utilities is there's such an interest in operating new nuclear, bringing new nuclear online, putting it into their portfolios, adding it to states' energy plans. How do we get there is a better question. And I hope that the announcements this year will show that there's an enormous amount of pent-up demand that's been building up for 40 years. We have these incredible sites, and the utilities have done such a good job operating that it's unlocked what I perceive to be an unlimited amount of capital to finance new plants. You know, utilities in the past had to finance it on their own balance sheet. And I think some utilities will continue to do that. We've got some big ones in the room. I would argue that nuclear will rarely be built on a utility's balance sheet again, and that it can be built in this off-balance sheet methodology that reduces risk and allows utilities to focus on transmission and distribution while developers and private equity and all the people who want to invest in nuclear front the capital and then allow utilities to phase in ownership per however they want. You know, sometimes the states demand a certain level of ownership. Sometimes, you know, in these competitive energy markets that we all loathe and feel like they hurt our nuclear plants, we can use those to our advantage, especially with hyperscalers signing premium PPAs. And so, you know, thinking about this, reflecting on what I was going to say today, I wanted to show a lot of gratitude to our nation's utility companies, especially in this time where they're working their asses off and people, I mean, we've got line workers with frozen helmets right now keeping our lights on, you know, and I feel like that is actually the backbone of this nation. And, you know, interviewing some of the even talking to my grandparents about utilities, it was very prestigious to work for utilities 3 generations ago. There's the top engineers who were working for utilities. And now we have so many, you know, exciting spaces that young people have gone out and, you know, occupied aerospace and software and all these things. But I think what we're seeing now is an interest in the real. And young people who I work with are interested in the tangible spinning metal and magnets, you know, like what is it in this moment of energy realism? How do we get back to, how do we go upstream and really look at what powers our lives? And I hope that the utilities are ready to welcome this next generation. And I think AI will help do that. You know, I get existential about AI sometimes, but at the end of the day, like, it is a tool. And it's a tool that can help young people accelerate into this space that has been so challenging for the public to understand. And beyond my admiration for utilities is a challenge. And that challenge is, we've proven now that nuclear is it. You know, it's going to be the future of humanity. And how do we grow into that opportunity? And bringing young people on will be part of it, but we also need to challenge utility leadership to announce new builds. And I think AI will help us make those decisions. And it's the work that utilities do every day to do an incredible job operating these plants, which is allowing this moment to happen. So more pain is required. We have to keep going. We have to continue to update from analog to digital. And we have to convince our utility executives that announcing these new projects is going to help our public perception, is going to delight their ratepayers, and is going to make their stock price go up. And we have to believe that with our full chest, because sometimes when we're talking to utility executives, they say, you know what, I just think our stock price will take a hit. I'm like, wow, that's the only thing holding back American nuclear is a blip in the stock market. And so maybe that's the final boss. And I think we can solve that because we're equipped with these incredible robots that the people in this room are making to ensure that we reduce that risk. And I think the people in this room do risk so well, right? We're all trying to mitigate risk in our own lives and at our plants. And now this final, I think what Oppenheimer is trying to solve is how do we de-risk the announcement and early development of nuclear plants so that once we reach that final investment decision, we can tackle all those big monsters up front and we can just build. And there's such an appetite to build from the utilities, from the federal government, from communities, from state governors and leaders, and young people who see nuclear for what it is, just an absolutely incredible energy source that we can solve our problems with. And they just don't have the baggage. So I think we should let our own baggage go and let these young people lead us. And it will take mentorship. And as much as AI has helped me, what's been so much more valuable and really kept me grounded is the mentorship that people in this room have provided me, as well as so many in the space. So I would, for all the people who work in this space, I encourage you to continue mentoring the new people who come in and welcome these new ideas. And we can use AI to qualify them, see if they're good, see if we can put them to work, and then ultimately just keep doing our jobs very well and trust that this idea is finally maturing and we can enjoy a much more stable and rational grid that's based in physics and welcome the people who may have opposed this thinking of a more a simpler grid that our great grandparents dreamed for us. I think we're all kind of coming back to that idea, and it's a big idea that we can welcome. And with the passage of the ADVANCE Act in 2024, one of the most bipartisan pieces of legislation in recent U.S. history, we've shown that this is beyond politics. This is just energy, and everyone is related to it, and we all share it. It's our common. And so let's continue to protect that, and let's continue to thank our utility workers for getting us to this point, and let's unburden them with this new knowledge that the robots have helped us release. So thank you.